Welcome everyone at the next multi-networking community sync. Today is August 30, and to be honest, I don't have much topics for today. I just started refactoring the draft of our cap. The one thing that I run into is issue is how to name the other object that we wanted to define in the pod. So I want to talk about that, and then I want to identify any other phase one gaps that we might have missed. If anyone else seen something, um, anyone else have any other topics? If maybe otherwise, if you have any other topics to talk about, please add. I don't expect it's gonna take longer than what we expect. Um, one maybe think of announcement is that we managed to get a talk about multi-networking to the next KubeCon. So me and Doug are going to talk about, the topic is about multi-tenancy using multi-networking. So yay, we managed to finally get into KubeCon and talk about whatever we do here in KubeCon to the kind of whole community. So that's kind of a win for us. Hopefully, we will get some of those changes merged in as this cap, so that we can talk about that one. I'm not sure about the implementation, but we'll see how that goes. All right. In terms of the pod network naming, so we have our main object called pod network, which basically represents is the main kind of handle for network representation in the cluster. But then we want to have additional granular per pod configuration capabilities, right? And that's what the pod network interface is supposed to be. And I'm calling it like that because I think this is what I initially proposed in terms of names, but I think the meaning at that point was slightly different. Pod network interface supposed to provide per network interface inside the pod, per attachment information, right? Which currently it's lost its functionality. That probably is going to be subsided to the probably params that you can provide in pod network, and maybe I will kind of share that so that you know what I'm talking about. Share this tab. Where are you here? Network interface. Yeah, I just changed that. So the object in question has basically just two fields. The network it belongs to. So the pod network interface will belong to it has to belong to some network because it cannot be only one. It cannot belong to multiple. So you would just create multiple other pod network interfaces if it has to belong to other one. And then a reference, a similar pointer to any CRD, like in pod network, that can specify um, some additional parameters for you to kind of ingest when a specific implementation would use this and support this object, and then would want to do some more granular per pod configuration. So that's what the object has. Any proposals of what we should call this object?
I mean, I'm not opposed to pod network interface as it stands. However, I guess my one concern is that interface is maybe a little overloaded. Um,
Attachment? Oh,
a- Pod network attachment, I mean, I think that is maybe good because it is like, yeah, how it's like the the pointers to additional
eh,
parameters here, right?
yeah.
Um,
There
I
you go.
Yeah,
I think yeah. I didn't like the interface as well from the same reason. But I think this is, yeah, now I'm.
The
I
attachment would
think
line
that's a
up
good name.
with common, a more idiomatic noun for the community across the entire
Yeah,
stack.
yeah.
Attachment is used in
Oh,
what's it called? Multis and also the CNI specification.
and you're saying that it fits or doesn't, because I didn't get that.
Fits.
Okay.
It's just idiomatic, so it's common, aka it's
Yeah,
common
yeah.
usage.
All right. Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, I think that's what I needed. Any other comments? I think someone else was on say. I think.
Are you gonna do, so you have pod network interface spec, will that also change? And interface status, like what's
Oh
the
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
scope?
will.
Okay,
I don't
cool.
want to bother you with it, but yes, I will rename all the network interface into. This is all gonna be pod. Yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
yeah.
I will update.
Just
I
making
just
sure.
no. I will change that, but I just want to make what because I just need the name, right, and then the rest is gonna follow. Yes. So pod network attachment. Any objections to this name?
I'm good with it.
All right, that's quick. You see, 5 minutes and we almost done. So I'm not sure anyone had the chance to look at the gaps or read through the doc as it stands. So and identify any gaps. I was thinking about this a bit, and I think I did found one gap. And one thing that we didn't mention, since going back to the pod network spec, so we have parameters reference provider, and we have all those two options, right? IPAM. One of the IPAM options is here, is external, where basically we don't do internal, we don't do nothing, but we do expect an IP. So basically this will be done by some external means. Kubernetes, where we expect a Kubernetes will do a node IPAM for us, and then we can expect a specific place which we would have to define, similar to node podsider, node spec podsider. Similar like that place where you have a per node cider defined, and you will pull from there for your network. That's the Kubernetes style. And then the last one is none, where basically we don't expect an IP. So basically, your let's say it might be some sort of just basic L2 connection, or you maybe want to have some DPDK and you manage the IPAM internally, or some of those. So basically, a case where I don't expect any IP from that attachment. And the gap what I'm seeing is this guy, because the other one, the other external and none are basically just do nothing from core point of view. But this one is on us. So basically, I think we didn't discuss on how would we expand the current per node cider story onto how to would support Kubernetes. And I'm trying to convince myself with we can punt it to another cap, since some of the things like the cluster cider is being I'm not sure how much you folks are following SIG networking. Antonio is currently working on sorting out the cluster cider, and there is another object called service cider that he's trying to kind of get in to the core as an object, right? So basically, since those are still in flight on how they're gonna behave, I want to make myself an excuse that, okay, until that guy is ready, this is when we're gonna after that. And that's what I want to kind of put in the doc here as well, that until that, basically this Kubernetes objects will not be supported yet. It's going to be a future thing in a separate cap.
Just real quick. So the plan is to line up with what Antonio is doing for
yeah, definitely.
future. Cool. Awesome.
So I think for that reason, this might have to be crossed out and then added with the new cap. That might be the case here. I will keep it just to kind of indicate that we wanted to have that, and I will call this out that we would do it after the cluster cider comes with service cider, which is currently in flight. And when that's done, then we will create a separate cap that will introduce this and connect with his work, right? That's kind of one gap that I'm seeing, and an excuse to not pursue it currently. Any comments? Any other comments? All right, I'll take silence as an acceptance. I think someone was any other gaps that you can identify. I think Wim last time mentioned about the gaps on how we are going to behave for the attachment and some corner cases for those. And I do remember. I unfortunately I didn't have time to look at the volumes, but this time I added myself a AI item to look at it, so that I will don't forget. This time I lost track and didn't look into this. But beside that, any other gaps that you might see for the first phase? And to kind of summary, we are going to end up with two new objects, the pod network and the pod network and then pod network attachment. Those two objects will allow us to unify the APIs. Those will be able to be specified in the pod spec. And then we will have a basic handling of that object inside Kubernetes. Basically, that's what this change will phase one of this change will allow us. I think for starters, anyone seeing like path forward from that point on for like, I'm not sure, Nathan, I think from your side, and Doug, or is Tomo here? No, he's not here. For Multus, do you see that this is sufficient for your implementations to do something? I'm not saying that you're gonna right away move to it, but is that sufficient for your implementations to
Yeah,
get some initial start points?
Yeah, I think that we can move forward with what's here, and yeah, mostly my concerns I think have been addressed, which is mostly that one, we don't have too many required parameters that go unused in my particular case, which I don't think is there. And between the params ref and the pod network attachment parameters reference, I think that we can fit in the pieces that we need, because at least, and I'm hopeful to see something evolve kind of at like a wider community level for CNI type of implementations. I'd like to see some evolution there, but if we I see a possibility that Multus can be modified to use this particular methodology, because I'm hopeful that people want to use this improvement that we've made, and I think that it's going to be better for say in particular a user who's or I should say a developer who's, say, writing a controller that has network intelligence. I think that this is going to be a better experience to use. So yeah, I think that we can work with this from a Multus perspective, and then I can see possibilities where when we have maybe a more holistic solution that takes into account, you know, say like next generations of CNI and what we want to see as a community there. Because something I'm certainly concerned about is, you know, keeping the rich community that we have created around CNI and having this sort of, you know, framework and standard API to work with, I think is really good for the community. And I think that it's really good for administrators and even people creating a managed service, that you have like this like kind of common ground to handle these type of questions. So yeah, I'm okay moving forward from here. And at least my experience with the network attachment definition work is that, you know, it's probably a reality that we get to a like certain point where we're starting to, you know, build some implementations, and people will come back to the table and be like, hey, this could use a tweak, that could use a tweak. So you know, I think that we're on, you know, fairly solid ground, that we have stomped on quite a bit here. So yeah, I'm okay to move forward from where we're at, and I'd be curious to hear what other people think too.
Yeah, any other comments?
Yeah, +1 for what Doug. Oh, I interrupted someone. Did
No, go for it. Oh.
I was going to just say +1 for Doug also, and continue like the current community is definitely will be useful here.
Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, +1 on my end as well. Agree with the Doug's comment. And regarding all implementation in Calico, I think that's we can definitely move forward, and we will probably try to move forward as soon as possible, because we were already doing something a bit similar, but with TRDs in our implementation. So yeah, that's
all right.
That's definitely
Sounds
something we
awesome.
can integrate.
So one thing that I will play devil's advocate here is, are we introducing just an API without any implementation? I think the example here being network policies, which exist today, which is an API that doesn't have a real implementation in the backend. Is that something that we are creating, and then the community is gonna, like the rest of the community is gonna push back?
Well, I kind of think, yeah, and maybe it makes sense to think about our sort of phased approach here, but
That's our excuse, the phase approach, right? That's kind of
yeah.
for this, right? That's what I'm thinking is that, but yeah, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I think that you know, more people will become interested in giving their input when they can kind of see the implementation in action. I think it gives sort of a like hands-on bend to it. So, you know, I think that we should be open to the fact that we might see, I don't think that we'll see a like revolution when we have implementations, but I think that we should be open to having evolution when we have implementations. And I mean, I think it would have been foolhardy to try to create the implementations kind of any earlier than now, or maybe it's even still a little too premature. And I think outside of some of the stuff that we're gonna have in here, like services, you know, I kind of think that we're not saying we're gonna make a like core Kubernetes implementation for this, right?
That's and that's even not possible. I agree. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
So we're gonna kind of see like non-linear timeline here a little bit with how implementations come in. So I would say, you know, I'm especially happy moving forward if we say, you know, this is our like stable platform. We don't want to change the whole shebang, but if people come back and are making implementations, and we can like make a good case for, tweaks, I think that's okay. And, also the life cycle for Kubernetes itself works in our favor, right? Because we're not saying this is going, direct to GA, this will be in beta phase for a bit too, right?
That's true. Right now, this is going just initially. This is going to be alpha, right? That's
Totally.
totally
Yeah.
alpha. So the other aspect to this is that we will, and maybe I will add that element. We will have to. You said like core Kubernetes implementation. We don't publish one, but if I'm not mistaken, Antonio has some CNI in the CI today for Kubernetes. There is some kube CNI or something. I'm not familiar. I need to look into that. And maybe we will. This change should implement that some sort of multi-networking in that guy, so that we could at least test it, right? Because otherwise. And something that is open source and it's owned by Kubernetes itself, right, by the core. And the CNI is very basic, from what I know. I need to look at it. I'm not sure. There is something, so maybe at least that's something that we would have to have somehow sort of maybe a bit of a reference implementation for all others, right? So maybe I will look into that. I will add myself an AI to look at. Yeah.
Feel free to reach out to me for that.
Oh, you're familiar with it, Michael? Can you give us some hints, some background on this then?
You mentioned the CNI, right? Or am I like breaking up and hearing random things in my head?
So I'm referring to some sort of a kubelet CNI, and I'm not sure about the name. That is being used inside Kubernetes end-to-end tests today in the CI, continuous integration.
Oh,
I'm referring that.
Oh yeah, well the CNI is not coupled with the kubelet here. It's with the runtime.
I'm talking about, no, that's fine. You're talking about like the components themselves, Michael. I'm referring a implementation of a CNI that is being used by Kubernetes test infra. I think there is something that Antonio implemented, so that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, so you're not familiar with that? Yeah. So that's why. Pete, you have a hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to check when we talk about not producing an implementation. I think that's fine up to a point. The bit that I think I'm less clear on is what happens in the kubelet, because we can specify all this stuff in the Kubernetes API. All these resources come into existence, and somewhere beneath that, something has to set them up. Now, to get that information, something is going to have to read these resources and pass whatever information it needs through. And I was assuming that was the kubelet, and therefore that would be core Kubernetes. So my mental picture of this is, well, if you've got CRI, you've got a CRI interface to pass information over, and the kubelet would get the information, then you shove it over the CRI, and it's down to the implementation to deal with. But that would be a core Kubernetes change. Is that what people are thinking of for how this would fit together, and that therefore there would be some level of implementation, even though it might not go all the way down?
So Pete, is this something that we discussed for the discussion for the CRI API? Because what you're calling in, and when we looked at it, it's purely the. Is there 6 CRI, Michael? I'm not sure. Is there something like that?
It's SIG-node.
It's SIG-node, just basically. All right, but what I'm thinking is this is a change in the CRI's APIs themselves. All right, and it's fully over there because down where kubelet passes things to the CRI, kubelet has access to the pod spec. So basically, we already provide from kubelet and core Kubernetes, we already provide all the parameters there. So because we change the pod spec itself. So what has to next change is the CRI's APIs. So, and this is what I called out in the doc. So what you're calling out and what we decided is that this part should be done by a separate KEP done with the discussion with the CRIs themselves, because you need to change the CRIs API. So then you have to have discussion with CryIO. I'm not sure what is CryIO, Containerd, and others, right? So basically, that's not. I hear you, but basically, from our point of view, from core. This is now if you want to change the yeah, I don't think that's part of this cap. That's what I want.
I think I think that's fine. I think what we're really saying is that's part of the next cap. There'll be another cap in future that, or we
But
expect
that-
there to be another cap in future that will cover this.
Yeah, that's what we are calling out. But that will be the cap that I think Michael, if I'm not mistaken, you picking up, right? You have a hand.
I was going to comment on that. I did add an agenda item to discuss that. So once we're
Okay, yeah.
done with what our current agenda item is, let's circle on that.
They had it. Exactly. Investing. Let me just add
Okay.
investigate. And let's any other. So before we jump to that CRI stuff, any other comments on what we have today? What we are trying today? What we are trying to propose to the community in terms of so yes, our staff doesn't have like the full implementation, and excuse is that because it's hard, it's not like we cannot impose anyone to have a CNI implementation. Everyone wants to have their own. That's one aspect, and the other aspect is we still phase one, so we are going to expand on this. It's not like we are one off and done. It's basically just the first phase out of the few that we have. So that's another argument too. That's why we are having here. I will look into the reference implementation that we do in the test infra. And maybe that's the only place where we will have some sort of a reference implementation so we can enable testing for this, because we should have some sort of testing in here so that and have some sort of reference implementation. So maybe that's one aspect where we will present something in terms of like implementation wise. Is that a good summary? I think that will be it. All right. Any other comments to this? All right. Yeah, Michael, go ahead. CRI caps.
Yeah, I was that was just the action item from last week because I didn't know, what the plan was, and then I guess somehow I don't mind doing it because caps are horrible, and I'll totally throw myself on that grenade. But that's the plan, to use what we have in this cap to facilitate the CRI changes in support of multi-network. I think that will be what I think would be useful here. In just throw it out here, is that we probably should join the next SIG node meeting with a little bit of a presentation just to discuss what multi-network is and discuss kind of the roadmap, especially like, what we intend to solve with MVP version 1, V2, V3. And then we can propose that, maybe they'll also push back and say, keep this all in one cap or have two caps. I would assume they're going to break this up into multiple two caps here. So I don't know how we want to like organize that. Like we can start a Google Slides or whatever it's called, just as like a quick 10-minute presentation of the who, what, where, whens for SIGNode, and kind of get their guidance. And also so they're more aware. So when they do see this, because regardless.
Yeah.
No,
I agree, and thank you for bringing this up, Michael. Yeah. Let's definitely do that. Do you know when is the next one? Is it this week or next week?
I'm not certain. Well, we'll also have to, I think to kind of cover all of our bases, it should be SIG node and SIG architecture, because those will all be involved with, the long haul of this effort. So the sooner we get them on board, the less hurdles we have to jump through now. So I think, how do you want to do that? Like we can start a community slides or.
Yeah, let's start working on the slides themselves. Exactly. And maybe let's start from let's do a road trip around around all the SIGs. So let's start with SIG network, if anything. Let's start over there. Any feedback from the wider group from SIG network on what we are thinking to do. And then move on to the other teams.
Cool. Yeah, and I don't know if this makes sense to kill a bunch of birds with one stone, but some of the content probably could feed into your KubeCon presentation, so that's less things you have to do.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, sounds good. That's a great idea. Let's do that. I will add myself another AI to kick off the. Um, mhm. All right. Any other topics? Any other comments on that CRI stuff? Pete, did we kind of address your concern here? I hope, right, with the CRI.
Yeah, I think so. I think the main thing I'm interested in then is what the scope of the next get will be and what the scope of things that will happen in the future is. But I don't think we need to go over that in this call.
No, I think we have time. We don't have much else to discuss. But any other comments on the CRI stuff from anyone else? All right, we have some more time. Next steps. Next step will be to finalize the draft of the doc, do the slides. That's a good point as well. Let's work on that so that we can now show what we did for the rest of the community. And then I think for this group, I'm not sure what will be the best course of action. Should we move on to the next phase and keep discussion on the second phase, which I'm not sure, or should we just focus on phase one? So basically in phase one, yeah, I will try to work on the doc, but after that, we need to kick off some changes in KK, try to kind of what we decided here, at least prepare changes for that. And then have maybe the implementation ready and in place as soon just when we're gonna push the draft, when we're gonna of course have a bunch of comments, address those, but then when we're gonna merge the cap, have the implementation in place. I think that's that will be the focus. Our meetings can be probably right now sync on where we at with some of those pieces. Thoughts? So basically, in terms of like design work, I would put a pause button on that one to kind of focus more on kind of the implementation side of the thing rather than just keep going with the discussion on design.
Something that came to mind there, Maciej, for the KEP is, do we have sufficient coverage on the resource life cycle, aka like have it pretty explicitly defined in the KEP of like what happens when you schedule a pod and there's no pod network resource? What happens if you try to delete the resource if it's attached? I believe those kind of questions do get asked quite a bit. And I just
think
want to, it may be here, but I just want to call it out really quick.
No. So basically the first one, what we said is pod network is not present. We call this out, right? So basically we would fail and we will say that if pod network is not present or not ready, then we will error out in a similar way what volume would fail. So basically if there is an error in your spec, so we will see how I need to check how the volume fails and do the same thing. That's on those aspects. And then you cannot delete pod network, right? You see the in-use condition is for that. So basically an object that is attached. So basically if there will be a pod referencing a pod network, we will set an in-use condition.
Yep.
And that will mean that that you cannot delete the object. So basically there will be a finalizer at least on that object until the pod is
Well, that I understand. So my concern was that it's not explicitly written.
Okay, yeah, fair point. Yeah,
because it's just going to generate questions, and we might as well get in front of people's what
Yeah.
happens if this. So it needs to be explicitly stated in the cap.
Yeah, explicit. Okay. I will do that. Fair point. Thanks you for that. Any other comments on this? I will try to come up with some list of tasks that we can kind of split if anyone wants to join in to do and help out. Right now I do have a branch on a KK, which I'm probably gonna have to update, or we can just start from scratch on where we could kind of collaborate any implementation of this. Or we can start even a PR, because it doesn't have to be what I want to say. We right now we have some ideas on this, and we can just create a PR against the master branch. It doesn't matter, right? And then basically we can mark it as in progress, or yeah, work in progress for everyone. But then we will have a place where we can do all the changes. So we can do that as well.
Actually, one thing, I was just looking through the document in the just a clarification or maybe an enhancement request is we talk about pod network, right? So where is it? Pod network
Attachment here. Okay.
KRM resources, new resources. It's just a text. Yeah, that one. Yeah. So point bullet 2, it says pod network may have overlapping subnets. I think my understanding is a pod network can have one subnet per family at the moment, right? So
across pod networks, sorry.
Yeah, so this should be across, yeah. So that was the clarification. Yeah. Should be across. Yeah. That's a minor thing, yeah. So
No, and that's good. Just keep in mind, I need to refactor, and that's a good one of the catches. But basically, I want to refactor it, and then I will ping you all on Slack to read through it, and then go crazy, and even comment on everything, because yeah, this is the more feedback I get, the better it will be readable, and the more something is less in that understandable. That someone else gonna reading this will run into the same issue. So please, if you see any gaps or something is unclear, point that out, comment in the doc, and then
we'll do. Yeah, or we'll wait till you are done, and then we can.
Yeah. Please wait though. Let me do the first pass on this. Let me refactor this properly. Add what the lifecycle description as well, and then we can and I will try to ping you. Hopefully maybe this week I will be able to finalize on this and tag you all. But yeah. Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments? Any other topics? I think to the next steps, Pete, as I mentioned, are you okay with what I mentioned to do, to focus now less on the design, more on the implementation side, kind of all the organizational and all that kind of busy work?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah, and basically on the top of the maybe I'll share this stuff for a second, right? So there is the requirements cap here, right at the top, where you will have that's not it, the PR itself. You go to the PR, and there is on the bottom of that PR, you have the phases split apart, right? So we I think covered last week. I went through the bullets in the phase 1. We covered all the required requirements items there. And then basically what's next is going to be phase 2, right? Whatever is in phase 2, we will push some elements to phase 2. I haven't updated PR with the push yet, so I will have to do that, but basically the phase 2 will kind of indicate what's on the plate for the next phase. Okay. if you're wondering what's happening next in this kind of in the plan out. All right, I think I'm not gonna give you back 15 minutes. All right, thanks everyone. Hear from you next week.
Cheers.
Thank
Have a good one.
All right, bye.